What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Battle for Azeroth video. The alpha is finally released, and I'm really excited about it. If you guys don't know, the Battle for Azeroth alpha is pretty much up to level 113 is the level cap, and then you can also do 2 dungeons, and you can do the first zone on each side in Koltaras and Zandalar. It's really fun, and I've been really enjoying myself. But not only do we have access to those things, we actually have access to all of the different classes at level 110 with like just like a gear template at pretty low item level. All the stats have been squished, and I'll talk about that in another video. But one thing I do notice in pretty much all of the classes is that not all of the classes, but pretty close to all of the classes, is that there are new abilities that have been lost or have been taken away by specs and certain classes and whatnot, and they're actually being reintroduced into Battle for Azeroth for a lot of these classes. And I have a lot of these buffs pretty much written down. I'm just going to go through them and talk about maybe why they've been introduced into these classes, and we're just going to go ahead and jump into it. And one that I'm really excited about, guys, is actually going to be Arcane Intellect. Pretty much buffs are coming back across the board right now. Arcane Intellect is really strong. Actually, it increases the entire party or raid, including yourself, your intellect by 10%, which means that you basically do 10% more spell damage, and it's just really strong. And being able to have these like raid wide party buffs and having that be introduced again into the game is like really cool. And I'm really happy that these are coming back, because not only does this give you a buff, it's a little bit more of a skill cap for you to have to constantly apply this buff, especially in arena. But it's also a magic effect, and a lot of purging and dispelling and all those sorts of things happen in arena. So having that extra buff to kind of like cover your buffs and have you have a little bit more of a button to work with, and constantly be having that 10% intellect uptime up if you do get purged is really cool. And I'm super happy that they reintroduced this. And I'll be talking a little bit more about the class reworks in detail, but I do want to just go over all of these different types of abilities. Next up, we're going to be talking about the Warlock, which has been getting some really significant changes in terms of visual effects. Like the whole destruction spec is completely changed in terms of visual effects. But not only that, there has been a significant addition to the Warlock kit, and that's going to be Shadow Fury. Shadow Fury is finally back, guys. It is a baseline spell for all 3 specs of Warlock. It's not just a destruction ability. While destruction may benefit the most from it, pretty much every single spec will have this Shadow Fury AoE 1 minute cooldown stun. It stuns all targets within 8 yards for 3 seconds. This is something that was really popular in Wrath of the Lich King, and just was overall a very strong ability. It allowed Warlocks to like set up and do damage and get their Chaos Bolts off. And the fact that pretty much every single spec has has Shadow Fury, it's just really impressive to see this come back. It used to be a talent in the destruction tree, but now it's like every single spec. So as you can see, Affliction, Shadow Fury as well. And this brings me to the addition to the Affliction rotation, and that's going to be Shadow Bolt. Shadow Bolt's finally back for Affliction, guys. A huge problem that I personally had, and a lot of people had with Affliction in Legion when they did all the different reworks and class reworks, is that they didn't have, like, they only had like 3 buttons. They had, or 4 buttons, I guess. They had the Curse of Agony, they had Corruption, they had Unstable Affliction, and they had Drain Life, basically, or, Drain Soul. And having your Shadow Bolt be reintroduced back into the class, it's really nice that they're like reversing the prune in a lot of ways. And this is definitely back, including the Nightfall talent, which is right here. If you guys don't know, how this has been in the game forever until recently, and then now it's finally back. Corruption damage has a chance to cause your next Shadow Bolt to be instant and deal 25% increased damage. So I'm really curious to see how Shadow Bolt will be in the Warlock rotation, but it's really nice that they are adding more buttons for Affliction Warlocks to press, because you guys really didn't have a whole lot to press, to be honest. Next up, we're going to be up on the Warrior, and I have a couple really interesting additions to talk about, and the very first one is going to be Battle Shout. So Battle Shout is across all of the specs, similar to how mages have Arcane Intellect. The Warriors are getting their Battle Shout back. It is a 1-hour buff. It's not like that 2 or 3 minute buff like it used to be in vanilla. It's actually a 1-hour buff, raid-wide buff. Increases the strength and agility of all raid and party members by 10%, similar to Arcane Intellect that gives you 10% intellect. This gives you 10% strength and agility. So it's going to be really viable for a lot of groups to bring Warriors and Mages, depending on what comp you're doing, especially in raids, Mythic raiding, especially at the higher level, and even Mythic Plus. And even in arena, like warriors are definitely going to be more used in melee cleave arena just because of this buff in particular. It's 10% more damage. Like that's huge. And also, I want to talk about Arms Warrior. You're getting back Overpower as a baseline ability. So this used to be a talent in the Arms Warrior tree. I think it used to be like right there. It was replaced with a new ability called Skull Splitter, which you bash an enemy's skull in, dealing 1100 damage, which is a lot on the alpha, and you generate 30 rage. That's a new ability, but we'll get into that in another video. It's more important to note that Overpower is actually going to be a baseline ability for Arms Warrior, which is something that I really enjoyed whenever I played Arms Warrior back in the day. So seeing it become more of a rotation ability, like something that you have to use in your damage rotation or use on a frequent basis, is nice. And I'm just happy to see that. And hopefully this will add a little bit more activeness to the overall Arms Warrior rotation. I don't see Overpower in Fury or Prot though, so just keep that in mind. And next up, we're going to be on the Priest, and I'm going to be looking at the Shadow Priest specifically because there's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. All 3 specs of the Priest specs get Power Word Fortitude, similar to how you get those raid-wide buffs. This is coming across the board pretty much. You're seeing Power Word Fortitude, which increases their stamina by 10%. It's another raid-wide buff. Nothing really different there. It lasts for an hour. It's very similar to Battle Shout and Arcane Intellect. It's very nice to see that. It also counts as a magic effect where Battle Shout does not. So magic effects also kind of give you that cover in arena for purges and dispels. And might protect one of your more important buffs, and also has a little bit of a skill cap because you do need to be able to apply this on the regular. And outside of that, Shadow Priest get back Life Grip, Leap of Faith. It's back on the Shadow Priest. I know that it was more of a Discipline Holy ability, but Shadow Priest actually get back their Life Grip. And I think that this is a great change. Even though Shadow Priests aren't the most mobile class, having that ability to life grip somebody out of a smoke bomb as a Shadow Priest is really cool, because maybe sometimes you don't want to play with the Disc Priest. You don't want to play with a Holy Priest, but having that extra utility and that extra defensive to kind of help out your teammate, whether you're in a raid or in a arena, I think that this is really cool. And I like that there is another layer for Shadow Priest to be able to act on. It's not so much just putting up Power Word Shield on your teammate to help them live for a little bit. You actually have the option to pull them 40 yards and take them into a new position, which I think is just really interesting, and hopefully opens up a lot of doors for Shadow Priest to be able to use utility-wise in the next expansion. And next up, we're going to be on the Druid, and this is a more interesting one because Druids in the BlizzCon Alpha version, the BlizzCon Alpha build, had Mark of the Wild back. Similar to how they had Power Word Fort, Battle Shout, and Arcane Intellect, everyone was really hyped about, but the Druids in particular were super happy that they had their Mark of the Wild raid-wide buff back, but on this alpha build, they don't have it. So I don't know if that's just a work in progress and they're trying to get the ability coded or something, but Mark of the Wild is definitely going to be a point of controversy for the community, because I know a lot of Druids saw that it was coming back. So for it to be pruned again and taken away again is going to make a lot of people salty, I think. But regardless, that might be coming, but is not currently in. However, Druids do have a couple of their abilities back from previous expansions. One is Hibernate, where you can actually force a target to go to sleep if a Druid is in cat form, or a Druid is in Moonkin form, I think, even. Or bear form. You can actually hibernate a Resto Druid sitting in bear form that's not healing and swap to his target in arena, or swap to his teammate in arena. You can hibernate Feral Druids and keep them a little bit more CC'd, and maybe land a cap on a Feral Druid in an RBG node. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with Hibernate, and I'm really happy that this extra ability has been returned to Druids. And not only do they get Hibernate, but they also get Soothe. And Soothe is a really cool ability that a lot of Druids really didn't use because it's such a minor thing, but really good Druids would use Soothe. And Soothe basically dispels all the enrage effects on enemy targets. So this includes Fury Warriors or Arms Warriors that have that enrage damage debuff or damage buff. You can actually remove that from warriors and cause them to lose damage out of their rotation. And that's really nice to see that little bit of skill cap being returned. I also want to note, guys, that this is kind of weird on the alpha. I can't say for sure that I can confirm that this is back, but for pretty much every single spec in Druid, you can actually learn Tranquility. So I don't know if this is a bug, but it's really interesting because if Feral Druids, if Moonkins, if tanks have Tranquility, that's going to be a really interesting thing that's added into the Druid kit. But again, when you log on and you create a character, it gives you all your abilities and you don't have Tranquility. So I don't know if that's just a bug. But I was talking with Soda Poppin yesterday, and he was really interested to see if Tranquility will make it for Feral Druids and Moonkins, because it would be just a huge utility boost, honestly. And it also increases healing by 100% when you're not in a raid, so that's for Arena. There's a lot of interest in this in particular. Now, bringing you over to the Monk class, I'm playing Windwalker right now, so with Windwalker in particular, you used to actually have to spec into Leg Sweep and Ring of Peace, but you actually are able to have that as a baseline ability, which is really interesting. You no longer have to have this in your talents. You can actually have them both. These were two different choices in the same talent tier. You can actually have them both at the exact same time as a baseline ability, and then you have new talents to go through, which I just think is really cool. I like that monks are getting more abilities to mess with, and I like that this utility. I didn't really like that they had to take Leg Sweep, because most of the time you would choose Leg Sweep. It was really rare for you to choose Ring of Peace as a Windwalker. Leg Sweep was just so important to your rotation, so seeing that as a baseline ability I think is more useful, and it just makes more sense in my opinion. One thing that's really interesting for pretty much all the specs, including Havoc Demon Hunter, pretty much all these specs, like Arms Warrior, Havoc Demon Hunter, we all have Taunt. Provoke, Taunt, well, I don't know what the Demon Hunter one is called, but all of those DPS specs have Taunt. And I don't know if that's intended, but it's definitely interesting. And because there's a lot of things you can do with Taunt. I know that with Windwalkers you could Taunt or provoke pets off of enemy healers to help them survive a little bit better. If you can also do that on other classes as well, and they're formalizing that action, or maybe make a play in a Mythic Plus dungeon by taunting off the boss and kiting him for your tank to reset his necrotic strike or his necrotic debuff. There's a lot of things you can do with Taunt, and I think it's just really cool, and I'm happy to see that is added for the DPS specs, because there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. But again, I don't know if that's meant to be there, but I would imagine that it is, which is cool. So it's nice to see Windwalker monks get a few different abilities that were more talent choices, but were really hard to choose. And it's nice to see them become more baseline abilities, which frees up more space for other talents to kind of play the playstyle you want to do. And last but not least, guys, we're on the Shaman. The Shaman has some huge changes that could really drastically affect PvP. I'm going to talk about the two totems that are returning to the baseline spec for Shamans. The first one's going to be a Capacitor Totem. It's a 3-second stun in 8 yards, and it takes 2 seconds to actually stun. This was a talent in Legion, for example, but now it is a baseline ability for at least the Elemental Shaman. And not only do you have Capacitor Totem, which is a great addition, but you also have the infamous Tremor Totem. It is back. And this is really big for PvP, guys, because what Tremor Totem does, for a lot of people who don't know, is that when you put down Tremor Totem, it actually removes Fear, Charm, and Sleep from party members and raid members within 30 yards. This is really important because a lot of people could basically counter Warlocks or Shadow Priests with this, and it's just a really interesting thing that they have actually reintroduced this back into the Shaman baseline abilities. And I'm really happy to see this, but I may not be happy, because I remember Tremor Totem was a really big problem for a lot of people. Having it on a 1-minute cooldown maybe is a little bit too short, because what Shamans would do is they would Tremor Totem every second Priest's Psychic Scream, and having that happen so frequently really pissed people off. But I also think that there was a skill cap to that, and outplaying the Shaman, faking out your fear and seeing if they'll pop Tremor Totem down, then killing the Tremor Totem and using your fear. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this, and I'm just interested to see how this will play out. I can't say if I agree or disagree with bringing this back into the game, but it's definitely interesting, and it's nice to see that Shamans are getting more abilities to press. I think more abilities is always better than less abilities, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out as the alpha and the beta unfold. But regardless, guys, that does pretty much sum it up for all of the new abilities. I will be doing class rework deep dives very, very soon on my YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe if you have not already. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to hit a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. If it did help you, leave a comment down below with what you think on the changes and the abilities that are being brought back into Battle for Azeroth. I'm pretty excited for pretty much all of these, and I'm really looking forward to covering this a little bit deeper whenever the alpha's been out for a longer time and I've had more time to think about it and look through these different classes. But regardless, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good one.